Welcome to Crypto Blockchain Podcast from Toronto. We have Randy McGuire with us, and we're talking about empowerment for everyone on the blockchain. So,
Right, a bit of an altruistic discussion about what the advent of blockchain technology can do to help the living conditions of humanity in general. We mentioned microfinance. Microfinance is a tool that can help poverty-stricken areas of the world, particularly Africa, where there aren't going to be centralized bricks and mortar finance industries coming and laying down the infrastructure to get financial products into the hands of the poor in a collective farm arrangement somewhere in Mozambique. But these people now have cellular systems. So they have mobile phones, smartphones on cellular systems, and that's a natural blockchain use case. When we have these wallet capabilities for mobile phones.
so I guess the question is, how do you take a mechanism that is able to transact currency on mobile phones and then incentivize folks to actually use it in a way that improves the overall standard of living?
Well, one of the ways you can do it is you can have a token which allows the farmers in a given collective in one of these poor communities in Africa. You can use the token not only to transact for the lending component of the collective that they have, but you can use it as a voting collective, as a voting mechanism within the collective to make decisions on where funds get allocated.
So, what is the core, selling proposition when it comes to selling governments on the idea that microfinance can be enhanced on the blockchain, but only if you allow cryptocurrencies to flourish, because the crackdown by governments tends to be on cryptocurrencies just because that's attacking their power structures.
Well, in this case, I think there's always going to be a regulatory component, whether you're in the abject poverty area of an African country, or you're in New York City. I think there's going to be a regulatory component to that. So we just have to anticipate that in advance and have some sort of a tracking mechanism for that. And one of the ways that we can ensure that is going top down. We think of blockchain as a decentralized, empowering tool, disintermediating large, financial institutions in particular, but also governments. Whereas the governments can be an empowering force here. As a matter of fact, the government of Kenya and the government of Pakistan are deeply interested in blockchain for microfinance. It eliminates a lot of their concern about infrastructure capital costs and still allows them to have an understanding of finance moving through their various economies, even at the lowest farmer level.
So do you see it basically as a power struggle between decentralized systems and governments that are centralized, or do you see it more as a collaboration between those systems?
Well, I think initially the vanguard of blockchain and cryptocurrency was, those people were really trying to disintermediate the existing structures that have wreaked so much havoc on the world in a plethora of different ways. But I think really, if you're realistic, you can't envision a world where the existing players do not have a role. So I absolutely see it as a collaboration between large players, be they governments or private sector, and public blockchains that will probably drive a lot of the business on the private side.
So what I heard from, I guess, McAfee, he was talking about, he was on the blockchain cruise, and they were talking about his projects, the stuff that he's involved in. Now, obviously, McAfee is a hero to some, and the jury's still out on that. But he said that once you have decentralized exchanges, governments will basically not be able to control that ecosystem. And I guess that's a good thing, hopefully. I'm just optimistic for the future of humanity, for sure.
I guess you have to define what control really means. Is just a reporting structure? Does that mean that they have control? Because I think everyone that's involved in, that will be involved in utilizing cryptocurrency to transact will want to have some sort of a reconciliation mechanism for business that goes wrong. So I think everyone, there's going to be an opt-in to having some sort of role for the government, at least so that the recording of that transaction, whether it's a medical procedure or a simple, simple small business loan, I think everybody wants to be able to reconcile that and to have some sort of ability to reconcile that.
And how do you see the role of the giant tech corporations like Facebook, Google, Amazon? Like, how do you see the role? I mean, in a decentralized model, like, do you see them going away, or do you see them adapting?
Well, they're trying to adapt now, trying to reconcile their businesses according to not necessarily decentralized approaches, but so that they can capture this cryptocurrency market. And in terms of remittance, they might be able to do that. If a family on Facebook are allowed to send money overseas rather than using Western Union, and they can do it instantaneously through cryptocurrency and not have the wait, not have the concerning fees involved with foreign exchange providers like Western Union. I think they'll certainly have a role to play there, and probably plays into the whole altruistic notion. But in terms of being able to create new blockchain solutions on the fly that are fluid and addressing humanity's needs as we encounter more and more challenges, I don't think those large players, Amazon, Facebook, Google, will be able to carry as much weight as they currently do.
I mean, my hope is that the decentralized model will spread to all these business models enough that you could have a decentralized Facebook and a decentralized Google search engine. That's, I mean, something when you have $1 trillion market cap company and it doesn't actually do any philanthropy, then that's concerning just from a humanitarian point of view, I guess.
That's as a business entity, that's hugely concerning. But a lot of the people behind these organizations are the new philanthropists, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. But they're also creating their own markets and solidifying control in very few people, whether it's an altruistic thing like philanthropy or not. That is certainly to be concerned about. But I think large organizations like that just don't have the agility to move as fast as artificial intelligence and blockchain technology is going to, and the Internet of Things is going to converge. I think they're going to be players, but because of the speed of technology and the speed of of our challenges, I think there's going to be a wealth of opportunity for other organizations, new organizations, and individuals to move into opportunity.
So since we're on the subject of philanthropy, so I had this idea for a philanthropy token, or PHIL token for short. The PHIL token would basically be a stable coin, maybe pegged to US dollar, and also have a system of rewarding good behavior and, well, not necessarily punishing, but the incentive model has to be baked into that token, just because I don't think philanthropy has to be non-incentivized. It can be an incentivized philanthropic model for sure. Any thoughts on that?
I see, that's. I think there's going to be a lot of philanthropy empowered by token economies. I don't really envision it being one specific PHIL token, although that's
interesting.
Opportunistic name. I like it. I like the token.
Do you have any VCs that might be interested?
Probably. There's probably tons of VCs that are interested. There's always a philanthropic component to good venture capital. But I think philanthropy will come out of token economies as a byproduct of being able to use tokens / currency in many different ways, rather than just as a barter mechanism. You can trigger token transactions with a variety of filters, and you can't do that with fiat currency. And I think that makes a huge difference in terms of how token economies can contribute to human need.
So I had this thesis that if companies need to have social impact, like positive social impact, which I think even in capitalist economies, that's something that they're increasingly want to do, or they need to do. Isn't it possible to incentivize corporations to act in that manner in order to have positive social impact, essentially incentivize positive social impact as part of their business models?
Well, has it worked to date? It really hasn't.
Right.
I think the jury may still be out, but I think capitalism has failed with regard to our new challenges. Once we're looking at a globalized world, both in terms of economy and social structures, I think most would probably agree now that capitalism has failed. It's empowered a very small percent to live in obscene wealth and luxury, and as we were discussing earlier, we've got a scenario in Mumbai where the equivalent population of Greater London lives in abject poverty with one toilet per 600 people, and that's a ringing rebuke to capitalism. Whereas I think now we don't have a better solution to market economies or open democracies than capitalism. Well, let's look at how token economies can operate within capitalism, and I think just the fact that these currency structures can have triggers and conditions to them rather than structures of the past like gold and fiat currency, where it's just a gateway to transact, to acquire, to consume. I think that can make all the difference in the world for capitalism, and make capitalism work for everyone.
So Blockchain for Peace, I think, is an initiative that's being launched on United Nations Peace Day, I guess. International Peace Day, I should say. So Blockchain for Peace is an interesting concept, and there's a few other philanthropic missions that I've heard of, such as the Unity project. They're working in stealth out of Florida, I think. But anyways, so I'm interested in exploring that idea, because what else can we do except hope that blockchain produces the more egalitarian outcomes that we've been hoping the internet would produce, but unfortunately it didn't, right?
Well, I think we can build successful businesses that have a philanthropic component to the token economy, and that's something we should probably be looking at for Coding Fly.
Yeah. But within the context of capitalism, do you think that there's a way to incentivize that, or is it just a responsibility to have profit for shareholders that drives that model?
Well, shareholders are concerned about one thing: their share increasing, and regardless of the nature of their share and its voting capability, it's a profit motive, and boards of directors of companies in capitalist worlds are all about one thing, and that's essentially part of the problem we have in the world today. Is that it's this profit motive. Well, what do we need to do? Is there a mechanism to top down insist that these token economies have a philanthropic component to them, or do we build successful businesses that are successful because they have the challenges, the solutions that they provide have a component to them that is a greater good, and yet they're successful? I think that's probably the way to go. I think we create model token economies that are successful, and that gets replicated by other companies that want to create a good business model. And of course, the consumer of these token economies, if they can get, if they're comparing apples to apples, and one apple contributes to the greater good of humanity, they're going to go for that apple.
So I had this idea of valuing human capital and valuing social capital in a way that is consistent with the framework of capitalism, in the sense that when a corporation says that they have responsibility to their shareholders and in terms of their bottom lines, what if the net social capital could somehow contribute towards that bottom line in addition to the financial capital that exists on the bottom line balance sheets of corporations? Sounds radical, or?
Well, how do you engage that mechanism?
Well, so I thought of taking the Phil token that I spoke of earlier and adding a component to that token which quantified social capital and social impact. One way of doing that is to have a smart contract that evaluates the number of calories that a certain community is able to access in their local grocery stores and within their incomes. So if we could somehow quantify that number, then by tracking that number on the philanthropic blockchain, we could assess the bottom line of the corporations in that neighborhood by saying that their bottom line consists of the social component as well as the financial component. Maybe I need to think that thing through, but something like that.
Well, I think you need a critical mass of given industry corporations to participate for something like that. So, I think really, you have to get a catalyst to get any critical mass of anything. So, I think you just have to have a company go out there like Facebook did with connecting people. It started as a let's get all the cool chicks at Harvard on this Facebook thing so that we can We can have a different method of connecting with them and dating, and then it turns into, this behemoth social network, which has a multitude of tentacles into society. Some which are very altruistic, and some which are strictly business, and some which are just very beneficial for families to connect each other, without going into all the nefarious data uses, from U.S. to election to Brexit to how Facebook monetizes you as a piece of data. That's entirely a different conversation. But I think what they did was they created a very positive solution for people that just wanted to connect with each other. And I think the same thing has to happen with anything altruistic in a token economy. I think we just have to create a solution for a human need, and once that gets some traction, then you within the governance of that solution, you have the components of a token, which dictates that a certain contribution from every transaction, including that token, will go to a altruistic cause.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the thing that interests me is the promise of the technology, but the thing that concerns me is that technology has always gotten subverted by the bad actors and the forces that wish to control humans in terms of their agendas. So I guess I'm hopeful that it will not be subverted, but you never know with these things, right?
Well, there's always going to be, the technology itself is available to everyone, so there's going to be nefarious forces that try to use the technology in those ways.
Right.
I think as long as we continue to use law enforcement in democratic ways, we'll find ways to root out a lot of that stuff. But I don't think we should not do the good because we're worried about the bad.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of positive that the blockchain and token economies can bring to humanity, and I think we should just concentrate on that. For instance, I met a lady earlier this week who's the CEO of a cinema company on blockchain, and this company has a token on the Ethereum network that pays people to watch content on this platform. So if there's somebody who's watching, let's say, something that is has a very emotional impact, for instance, there's a documentary called Urbanized that displays a lot of the concerns with the human migration to cities. Without getting into the immigration concerns we have in the world today, just the migration of humanity into cities for services, for jobs and services. It's creating tremendous impact on infrastructures. And perhaps somebody watching this documentary on a blockchain tokenized platform can then at the end of it be empowered to use their token that they've just earned from watching this emotionally impacting documentary to then contribute to some altruistic cause to alleviate some of the challenges that they witnessed in the program. We can reach a lot of people this way, and we can basically creating capital out of existing human behavior, out of viewing habits.
So I guess the mission of our podcast is also to seek out those sorts of projects that are going to be empowering towards society, right?
Well, I think that's the hope of the technology, that we can create a better living environment for our species, and at a time of great challenge that's threatening humanity at every concern, from climate change to overcrowding to global economy, forced immigration, and automation. automation involves a lot of machine learning concerns, robotics. Well, I think blockchain can provide a lot of solutions in terms of a lot of ideas being bandied about universal basic incomes and taxing robots, taxing a lot of these automated processes, and we can track all of this stuff and filter it all through blockchain and artificial intelligence.
So are there any pitfalls that you're worried about in terms of smart contracts being used in the wrong way by bad actors?
Certainly. And our artificial intelligence is a huge concern all on its own. The fact that we aggregate all of this data. There's so much data being created on a daily basis. Humans can't actually parse the data anymore. We need machine learning to be able to parse the data. So just from that perspective alone, we have huge concerns about artificial intelligence, and the next step in neural networks was achieved with Google's DeepMind back in March. Machines are making decisions on their own based on what they learned on the base layer. That's a concern by itself. When you add in nefarious actors, human nefarious actors, being able to program smart contracts to take advantage of that, that's of enormous concern. But I think technology is always, from the first mechanisms to control fire, to the wheel, to industrialization 200 years ago, up into through PCs being in the hands of individuals rather than corporations, to the internet, and to where we are today with blockchain. There's always been a huge concern of technology providing numerous threats to our existence, and I think we've done pretty well so far. I think we'll manage it.
So just to wrap up, what are the topics that we're going to be covering in future editions of this podcast?
Well, we've had some rather interesting developments over the course of the past week. This is early September 2018, and we've seen the regulators, basically the mainstream, both on the government side and on the private sector side, basically give a blessing to this technology, with Citigroup getting blessed by the regulators, as well as the Gemini platform and Plaxo. So I think we're really looking at a tipping point for mainstream acceptance and capital flowing into these solutions. Whereas over the past number of years, it's been, what is this cryptocurrency stuff? And now we're at I think there's beginning to be a mainstream understanding that blockchain solutions empower a whole different way of human interaction, and we'll look back at this week as rather significant, I believe. So I think perhaps maybe the next podcast we can delve into what really transpired this past week in terms of these stable coins being accepted by regulators.
Absolutely. So with that, let's conclude this podcast and hope for the best. Let's hope for the best.
All right, signing off.
Thanks. Bye.